biggest people really in the mega story of the royal family is this woman. That is, of course, Wallis Simpson. But like for so many people, her story is very strange in many respects because unlike, say, that other American that's currently associated with the British monarchy, Wallis never really sort of exploited her association with it. You see, she went into it really basically because in some respects, some might suggest she was forced into this marriage. You know, we know that she didn't want to necessarily go down that route, but at that point, the former king basically said he couldn't imagine life without her. So consequently, as you can see from letters and historical sort of pieces, she went along with it. And as she pointed out herself, you know, the great romance is not everything you might think or read about. Quite a tragic tale. And this is the sort of basis really of this latest movie that's coming up and currently going to be filmed in London and in Paris, focusing on Wallis Simpson's very final couple of years. Now, what's interesting about this is one of the stars that's going to be appearing in that, taking the lead role of Wallis Simpson, is none other than the, well, what could you say about this lady? She's been around a long time, Dame Joan Collins, and I mean that in the nicest, kindest possible way. But what's interesting about Dame Joan is she's a fascinating lady to meet. You know, literally has met so many wonderful people. And not only that, you know, has a wonderful association with the British monarchy, becoming, of course, a dame. Now, she never forgets to remind you that it's Dame Joan when you speak, just to let you know, chums. When you meet her, oh no, it doesn't answer to Joan. Yes, some might say she's more Alexis Carrington Colby than she likes to think she is, but you know, she's earned that right, possibly. Now, basically, Joan, as I say, is taking this role on as Wallis Simpson, but this isn't her first time really with a brush with royalty. Way back in 1955, she starred opposite the formidable Betty Davis in The Virgin Queen. And what's interesting here is this folklore story goes around that Betty Davis didn't like Dame Joan Collins, or simply Joan as she was known then. But I have another version of that story because I was lucky enough to meet two of the stars. Well, actually, Rod Taylor, that was his very first big movie role, a small part, but nonetheless, a first time working at 20th Century Fox in Hollywood on a big picture. He told me that the bottom line, alongside the British actor Richard Todd, who we loved, of course, in The Dam Busters, well, he said actually Betty didn't have a problem with, you know, Joan Collins being in the movie, whatever Joan's version of events are. She always claims that Betty didn't like her and treated her quite badly and stuff like that. Betty Davis was a woman of her time. She wanted you to turn up on the set, know your lines, do everything perfectly. Now, I'm not suggesting that Joan didn't do that, but I think the bigger problem was that she didn't like new, younger, fresher actresses having all the fuss, you know what I mean? So there's Joan, fresh in Hollywood, and suddenly being groomed as this new girl at 20th Century Fox, perhaps a British Ava Gardner. That was the idea at the time, and consequently they didn't necessarily see eye to eye. But I would say that in fact, well, yes, I would say that Betty gave Joan a few tips on exactly how to behave and continue to behave on a set, whether Joan would agree on that or not. Rod Taylor, who, as I say, a wonderful Australian actor, I was lucky enough to meet him just briefly, but what a guy, and could have been James Bond, by the way. Yes, that's another story. Well, the thing is, he said the same thing, that, you know, Betty just really didn't necessarily like younger competition. And let's not forget, The Virgin Queen was all about Elizabeth I. But back to this, Wallis Simpson. As I say, it starts rolling pretty soon. A 91-year-old Joan, this is going to be a very first big picture for some time. And she's been asked about what she feels about Wallis, and she says that she feels that she's been maligned and that, you know, her story will be good to get out there. Now, I don't know if a lot of chums know this, but in the latter part of Wallis Simpson's life, she was treated very badly by those around her, selling artefacts, stories about her, making a lot of money from her because she was incapacitated, had a lot of health issues, arthritis, that sort of stuff, you know. And what was fascinating here was that our late and brilliant Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, very quietly, without fanfare or fuss, dealt and sought out a lot of the ongoing medical bills and living expenses for Wallis Simpson. That was the way that she was. You know, maybe the Queen Mother would not have known that. You know, she was not a fan, as one can imagine, but did her best to be civil. As for Joan, as I say, she says she wants to portray her in the true light and has been reading up and watching all sorts of things about her. As you can see here, I was lucky enough to go and look at the flat where she used to live in George Street, just off Edgware Road in London. And it's hard to imagine when you're standing at that door, literally the history that would have taken place. Now, all of those young people going in and out with their brand new flats and all that sort of stuff, they have no idea what's gone on before. Beauty, of course, of retelling a story, particularly with an esteemed actress like Dame Joan Collins, well, hopefully this will reignite interest in her and perhaps finally tell the true story of what happened in her latter years. The movie is set to be out at some point either later this year or hopefully early next year. Does this have Oscar material signed on it for you? I'd love to know what you think to Dame Joan's casting as Wallis Simpson. I think they have a look of each other. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.